Hello everyone and welcome to the next episode of the Road to FIDE Master playlist. In this one I will cover and analyze the round number 4 of the Baltic Pearl Chess Festival, in which I had black pieces and played against a guy who I was not really facing that much during my junior years, but since he's just 1 year older we were seeing each other very often at many top level tournaments, and therefore even though we haven't played a classical game between us, we knew each other quite well. And that's the introduction to the video, and now let's just jump straight into the game. So the game started with the move e4. I knew that my opponent is well prepared in terms of opening theory. However, his opening theory is like from 10 years behind, because when he was a junior he was at the top club, training much, learning much, and so on. But I knew that after a few years he didn't really refresh his opening repertoire. Therefore, I wanted to play some mainline, but also a sharp line in which he might know what to do early on, but not know what to do later, if that makes sense. So, even though I don't usually play e5, I decided to do that because I knew that he will continue with the Ruy Lopez and with the main line. So I was not expecting a trade here or some crazy or just rather different, let's say, move order. I knew that there will be a main line, after which I prepared castle here with the idea of playing martial attack. Martial attack, I believe, suits very well against this opponent because, as I've said, he might know the early stage of the variations but maybe not the later ones. So martial attack, known for its aggressive setups and so on, I felt like it's a good opening choice. However, obviously my opponent did not allow me to play this martial attack fully. He played a move h3, which is known as one of the anti-martial systems, with the idea being that as of now d5 immediately may not be working as well. That's why I opted for the bishop b7 move. It is still theory. I was prepared because after d3, which is once again the main move, now I can play d5 anyway. The whole idea of this variation and also about the martial attack is that I, as black, want to sacrifice a pawn for the piece activity, active and aggressive play, and as I've told you guys, if white does not remember the variations, I might get very playable and nice position. So the game continues like this. He takes my pawn here and then on e5, which seems logical. This is the pawn that I am sacrificing, and at this point I played move queen d6. I believe there are some other lines also that can be considered, but I like this line the most. The idea is that I'm not ever scared about the exchanges because it would give me the bishop pair advantage, overall activity. Therefore, I expected white to play rook to e1 immediately, after which I had a very nice looking move rook a to e8. This is a theory move. Still, I am in my preparation. I don't want to bore you guys with all the details, but I understand that this is the best move. And the idea is that as of now I'm still in my preparation. White had done everything correctly, but from this point onwards it's not easy for white to navigate the position correctly. So I basically got everything that I wished for. So my opponent started with the move knight to d2. Simply developing move. White's idea is to try to deliver the defender to the king side, because now the king side is kind of weak and my bishop and maybe a queen in the future will be pointing into the direction of the opponent's king. Therefore knight d2 is still an okay move, after which I've prepared c5, and now first time in this game my opponent played a move that I was not expecting, which is knight f3. And I was unhappy really with myself, since I covered mostly the main lines of the opening book, of the computer suggestions and so on, and I didn't really cover the, let's say, human choices. And I think that during the game, when my opponent opted for knight f3 move, I felt like it's a human move, right? So whenever you are preparing for the opponent, it's very useful to not only check the best computer lines and grandmaster lines, but also think about the position like in a human way, like what would you play? A knight f3 seems logical. As I've told you before, this is adding the defender for the king side. Feel like white is gaining some control over the center of the board, so it all seems logical, right? I mainly covered knight to e4 move and queen to f3 move, since those were the more popular ones, let's say. So, right off the bat, I knew that knight f3 might not be the most accurate move. However, I couldn't find a specific reason for it. So I was just trying to continue with playing healthy moves, and the most logical move that I would really love to play is the bishop f6. And bishop f6 that, for example, in the knight e4 line cannot really exist because knight is pointing into that direction. So I felt like, okay, if knight went to f3, maybe now I can just simply play bishop f6. But then after the game, even though I wasn't trying to check the game with the computer, so that this is the analysis purely based on my thoughts, not the computer thoughts, I just spotted in the opening book, not in the stockfish, that in here black usually opted for the bishop d8 move. Quite a quiet move, to be honest, and the idea behind it is that we want to create the battery with the queen later on and not really focus on this diagonal, but rather purely on the king. Quite an interesting idea. I believe I will have to spend some more time on it in order to be well prepared for the future games. However, at this point, as I've said, I've played bishop f6. Now opponent is kind of out of moves because knight is well placed, nothing to do about it. Bishop cannot move. Rook really cannot move anywhere other than exchanging. So the next piece that would like to be developed is the bishop, but bishop cannot move due to the b2 pawn hanging, right? So at this point, c3 move looks like a sure move, like 99% of the time opponent will choose that move, and I knew it. And instead of sitting at the chessboard and thinking on the opponent's time, saving my time, I just started, like walking around the playing hall and so on, wasting really my time later on. So I was very unhappy with my choice. Also due to the fact that after c3, which was obviously played, I initially wanted to sacrifice on c3 with knight c3. And I calculated it briefly, then I started walking around, and then instead of calculating it deeper, I was just happy, oh, okay, I will sacrifice and so on. And then when I got back to the chessboard, I spent like 50 minutes calculating this idea, which is not working. So I was like mad at myself even more because I wasted the time. I wasted then double the time because I was trying to make this work, and it didn't work. What's the idea? I saw during my preparations that after c3 there are some ideas of sacrificing on c3, and the idea was that after b takes c3 I can also make an in-between move, which is bishop takes f3, trying to get rid of the defender of the rook. And right now, even though I am a piece down, I got myself 2 pawns for it, and also I am double attacking the rooks. If, let's say, opponent opts for a move like this, I can now take, maybe penetrate the position here. So here's the threat, here's the threat. I mean, maybe a queen will go there and so on. So it looked very, very promising. So I was really trying to make it work. However, there is one very, very nice option for the opponent that I initially missed before I started walking around on the playing hall, which is bishop takes f7. An amazing defensive active resource, let's say, with the idea that obviously I cannot take the bishop with a rook because my rook would be hanging, and I cannot really take with the king because now queen b3 is the move. And this bishop, which was a very powerful piece of mine, is just simply lost. So my sacrifice did not work. I will be a piece down, and there is no real like threat to the opponent's king really, even though I can try to put my rook here, maybe queen there and so on. There is nothing really working that well. And I've spent a gazillion of minutes calculating all this, and as I've told you guys, it was much better to do it on the opponent's time, since a move like c3 was very well expected. And therefore I had to think about the other move to play, and then once again I spent another 15 minutes on thinking what to do, because at this point I had many options. So let's say I can try to play knight f4, hitting the d3 pawn that is just weakened after c3, right? I could have tried knight b6, trying to play c4 myself and limit this bishop, for example. I also can try to play an in-between exchange of the rooks. So plenty of options, not sure what to really do. So I was really unhappy, even though my position is still okay. Psychologically, I was not happy with myself, and it's never a good thing when you're playing chess. Anyway, I went for the b4 move. And this is also the idea that I was familiar with from the preparation. Mainly, the thing is that I want to attack the c3 pawn. Exchanging the pawn on b3 would always mean that I have now 2 weaknesses to target, and for sure I will be able to take at least one of those while also perhaps maintaining the initiative. So I was happy with this variation, because in general c3 was played in order to close my bishop, right? And c takes b4 would open my bishop once again. So I was not expecting that move. c4 might be also played, but the idea is now that the bishop is completely closed and this move solidifies d3 pawn as a weakness. So I was also not expecting that. So what to expect? Well, you can basically expect only bishop d2. Bishop takes d5 might be an option, but after queen d5 I felt like with a tempo I create the battery, I have the eye to the d3 weakness, so wasn't really counting on this move. And once again, guys, I made the same mistake 2 moves in a row, meaning that opponent went into a tank, meaning that he started thinking and thinking, and even though I was purely sure that he will play bishop d2 move, once again, instead of thinking on his move in order to save my time, I started walking around, trying to play a boss, trying to show him that I'm well prepared, in a better situation, and so on. So twice in a row I've made the same mistake, which afterwards made me twice as mad, or even 4 times as mad at myself than usual. So yeah, pretty shocking from my side. And at this point the problem is that white solved all of the main problems, meaning that his queen side is developed, and I don't have clear idea of how to attack the weaknesses or the king, so I had to figure out how to continue the game. So I decided that I will play b takes c3 first, now rook e1, and now knight f4. Knight f4 was an idea that was on my mind throughout all this time, but just one simple line I will give you at this moment when I was calculating knight f4. I didn't like the idea that he can just try to exchange the knight with this bishop that haven't ever moved yet and play queen d2. So the rooks are connected, the queens are perhaps exchanging, so I felt like there is nothing to gain for me in terms of holding up the initiative and so on, so I didn't like this variation. But in the game after playing b4, exchanging here and there, I felt like knight f4 is better, due to the fact that even though my opponent might also try to exchange the knight here and then go for the queen exchange, queen d2 is not really working that well, since I can trade, play bishop c3, attack both pieces, and after rook d1 I have the bishop pair. I have the rook that I can go either to the open file or to the d3 weakness, so I felt like it's okay position for me. But obviously opponent might try to play queen e3, and I really was hoping that he will not play that move. I hope that he will have more fighting spirit in him, but this move showed me that my opponent is mainly interested in a draw in this game. Why do I think that? Well, because after the exchange that could have happened in the game, I exchange here, I take the pawn, and we get the endgame with the opposite colored bishops with equal material, so I mean draw is inevitable, right? But obviously I didn't want to draw. I believe I showed it already by choosing the opening I've played. So at this point I decided, okay, no queen trade, let's play queen f5. Oddly looking move, but surprisingly queen is kind of safe here. Nothing to be worried about in terms of the queen's placement. But once again I was not sure if I will be ever able to win this game, because I am a pawn down and opponent might have played a move d4 that I really didn't like, because I didn't find anything better than just simply exchanging the pawn on d4 and after cd4 playing rook d8, trying to simply attack this pawn and more or less agree to a draw, because I can always try to simplify on f3 and then take this pawn, ending once again in an opposite colored bishop endgame and perhaps a draw. So I felt like this might be what happens. Also I considered move like rook c8, but I was unsure how to proceed later. So all in all I felt like d4 would be the move that would be indeed a draw offer, to be honest, because as I've said I can simply trade on f3 and trade on d4 and so on. However, my opponent with the rook c1 move, and it seemed odd, because usually when you were so underdeveloped as white was, you should be looking at active moves, let's say. So I would rather place a rook on b5, right? Obviously the c3 pawn was hanging, that's why I meant that d4 move should be the one to play. Rook c1 obviously defends the pawn, but it's not in the spirit of the position. The position is dynamic, so white is lacking the activity. he should look for it. And he didn't. And I felt like this move is simply a waste of tempo. So I got the free tempo to do whatever I want. And I've always wanted in this game to place my bishop on c6 in order to cover e8 square so that I will be able to activate my rook. So felt pretty nice. And after one, let's say, a little bit shocking move, opponent played the second one, which shocked me even more. Because I felt like I'm getting the material, guys. Because the idea is that as of now I can play rook e8, and after queen goes back to the only safe square, I can trade on a free, remove the defender of the g5 square, and then try to play bishop g5, pinning the queen and the rook. I'm not sure if you all can see it, so I will just play out the moves. Rook e8, queen d2, bishop f3, bishop f3, bishop g5, pinning the queen and the rook, right? So seems winning, and my opponent blitzed out all the moves, so I felt like, okay, he might have blundered, right? But there is very nice way of dealing with the spin, which is rook e1. And guys, I cannot take the queen because of the back rank checkmate. So now I was 150% sure that my opponent wants only a draw, because instead of playing active moves in here, he played rook c1 and bishop d1 just to make me fall into his drawing trap. So I acknowledged that there is a drawing trap with this rook e1 amazing move, and I didn't fall for it, and thanks to it I felt like those two moves was just a waste of time, and time is really the only thing I needed to push for the win. So I started with rook e8 anyway, because it's a very logical move, but now I didn't go for this line, but I felt like, okay, now's the time. White went a little bit passive, g5, h5, and let's begin the fun. The idea is that I am kind of safe in terms of the center of the board, meaning that you should never ever attack on the side if the center is not solidified, closed, and so on. Even though there are some possibilities for the opponent to try to open it, I felt like it doesn't achieve much. So I felt like I'm okay with the kingside attack. That's basically it. And as you can see, guys, after my move g5, opponent went with rook b1. The trick did not work, so he is now playing correctly, but I believe it's 2 tempos too late. My idea is simple. I want to push the pawns, push the pawn to g3, kick out the knight, open the f5 for the queen, maybe weaken the e1 square, and try to look for some checkmating even patterns. So opponent with the bishop b6 move, rook b6 move. Now I played bishop d5. It might seem counterintuitive because now opponent might try to play c4, but I was more than happy with that because now I wanted to place my bishop back to a8. Because the difference is that if I play bishop to a8 immediately, pawns are staying that way, right? And if I play bishop d5, c4, bishop a8, now d4 square is weakened, so if I ever kick out the knight, perhaps it will be a nice square for my bishop to be put at the outpost, right? So that's my thought. But after bishop d5, my opponent did not play c4, he took second pawn, but I felt like once again, white is not playing this position in a way that he's supposed to play it, meaning that the position is too dynamic for him to just simply waste so many moves to grab additional pawn. He already was 1 pawn up, now he's 2 pawns up, but my attack is growing and growing. So I just continue with my idea, which is g4, takes, knight h2, g3. Let's go. Sacrificing third pawn, and the idea is that taking the pawn would end perhaps immediately the game, since I have the bishop g5 move, which was in general the idea behind pushing the g-pawn. I wanted to have the g5 square for my bishop, which was unavailable for him, let's say at this point, right? Because the knight always covers, so I had to push my pawns to g5, h5, g4, and so on in order to have this square available. And the idea is that if he takes, I have bishop g5, threatening to the queen, threatening with some checks on the first rank. So bishop g4 is the only way for him to deal with this stuff tactically. But now I have simply queen e5 going away from the bishop attack. If he tries to still cover the first rank, I have like queen g3, threatening with this, like too many weaknesses and so on. I'm winning the game. So due to those reasons, I felt like my opponent will play knight g4, and I'm not really sure, guys, if it was at this moment or the previous moment when I pushed g4 or in between or something, but I spotted an amazing resource to win the game that I felt like my opponent might miss, We were both below the 20-minute mark on the clock, so we were starting to get, let's say, kind of stressed out a little bit or something, so we had to calculate quicker and quicker. And this whole sequence of me pushing g4, take, knight h2, hitting the pawn, g3, going away, and so on, seemed more or less forced. And due to that fact, I felt like my opponent will not waste too much time calculating the variations and will go with knight g4, bishop g5, knight h6, which is a very nice resource, avoiding the attack to the queen because now there is the double attack, so I have to exchange the knight, right? Seems fine, but guys, I have an amazing move here, which is queen to f4. Queen to f4, after which white can just simply resign. What's the idea? Well, obviously I am hanging the queen, but surprisingly, this g3 pawn allows me to win the game because it covers the h2 square. So after the queen is taken, I can deliver the checkmate on the first rank while being a queen down. So that's what my opponent missed, and you cannot blame him. It's not the move that you firstly come to your mind, and it was at the end of more or less forced sequence, so it happens, right? So thankfully I had such move, and the thing is that he cannot play anything, because if he does not take, like, what can he do? He goes away, right? I mean, I can still checkmate him, right? So this is hanging, this is hanging, this is hanging, this is hanging, like, I'm just winning on the spot, thanks to this one crazy looking but very good move. So basically my opponent acknowledged the fact that he is completely lost after this blow, and he allowed me to checkmate him. So very nice of my opponent to allow me that, because during the classical games it's not that common to be able to checkmate. So I thanked my opponent after the game that he allowed me to do so. Good sportsmanship on his behalf. So yeah, I won a pretty nice game in a pretty nice fashion. So I was really happy with this game. One thing I wanted to add, guys, because if I spotted this queen f4 idea, let's say around this point, right? When you are playing the tournament, I didn't want to make the same mistake third time in a row, meaning that even though I knew that at this point, if he plays knight h6, I'm winning, I felt like I had to find defense for him. And the defense is quite crazy, because at this point, he can play a move like f4. The idea behind it is, if I take now with the bishop, knight h6, takes, and so on, I don't have queen f4 move, because he can just simply take, and the difference is that he sacrificed the f-pawn in order to be able to cover the check with the queen. Obviously, it's not easy to even consider move f4, but if you think about chess and about variations in a way that, let's say, focus on the chess motives rather than purely the variations, if at this point this move loses due to the queen f4 move, going back to this point, I felt like, okay, what would make white defend against this move? So f4 was the, let's say, logical assumption then. So if I take, now I don't have a clear option how to continue. This move does not work, and surprisingly, like, I cannot really attack anymore because my bishop is gone. I would love to have it, but I exchanged it, so no way really to continue. So I was not happy with the situation, meaning that if my opponent spotted the queen f4 threat, I would not be easily winning. I thought about queen e5 briefly, but then king f1 covered the square. Once again, no penetration of the first rank, so quite unlucky. Then I started thinking, okay, maybe after knight h6, I might just play king f8 and allow this trade. So I started calculating this, but as I've told you guys, I only started to do it. And then my opponent, due to the time pressure, he already played the knight h6 move here, so I was relaxed, happy. I knew that I would win, but I thought that it was worth mentioning that I did not make same mistake 3 times in a row, meaning that if I saw the f4 idea, I started calculating it during the opponent's time, saving my time in the end. So yeah, pretty nice game, pretty nice win. I'm happy with my opening choice. I was happy too with the finish of the game, and yeah, 4 out of 4, pretty decent result. I am not sure if I ever had such an amazing start to the tournament in the past years when I was facing good opponents. And as you can tell, the game was pretty much around equality all the time, as usual in the Marshall type variations in the Ruy Lopez, but then when I had my chance, I took it, so my accuracy is much higher than the opponent, even though opponent played also quite a good game. So overall, as I've said, nothing to really Nothing to really be mad about. We didn't even get to an endgame, as you can see, so first game that did not get into it, meaning that the game had to be a good one, right? And yeah, 4 out of 4 with black pieces. Next game coming up with white pieces. So yeah, pretty happy so far, and I hope you like the game and my analysis. If so, remember to leave a like and subscribe, because next video will be in few days. I guess tomorrow I will make a Title Tuesday stream with then the recap, so a little bit of a break from this tournament. We'll get back to it, so stay tuned. Thank you for watching, and we'll see each other shortly. Bye bye.